The Force is strong with Hayden Christensen. A little of him goes a long way. Yes, he only shows up briefly here, and I appreciate that Disney and Lucasfilm didn't do him the indignity of a cheap de-aging filter. Also, he still looks pretty close. You have to take a really good look at him to see that he's aged since, the prequels, which is impressive. But fans, just with this little bit, went absolutely nuts to see him. And that just goes to show how the prequels really do have a fan base. As I've said, thanks to what Filoni did with his animation, building off of those stories, and his stories featured Anakin and Obi-Wan a lot. And, Hayden Christensen's going to be in the Ahsoka show. So that's pretty exciting, right? So that's some Star Wars turbo-ness for that show as well. That's interesting. So I guess this is just the beginning of Hayden Christensen's Star Wars return, and maybe that's why it's okay that he's not used here so much. But there's been chatter of a potential season 2 of Obi-Wan, that maybe it will come back. You've been hearing that here and there. I don't know if it's wishful thinking. I don't know if it's true. I haven't heard anything from my own sources. But I think it makes sense, considering that it would give Lucasfilm the chance to give fans the Obi-Wan show that they wanted instead of the one that they got. I think that it's pretty clear how best of an opportunity this was, and I think a second season would give Lucasfilm the right to fix that. I don't think Ewan McGregor and company want to go out on this note. No matter how good Episode 6 is, it's too weak to leave the Obi-Wan story here. But Obi-Wan does impart an important lesson on Anakin in this duel, and that's why they show this scene. And that's that if you're so focused on winning, on dominating, on a show of power, you miss the subtle other angles on how to win. Whereas Obi-Wan is able to take Anakin's lightsaber using the Force to replace the one that Anakin took away from him. It's just a subtle, quick move. It's not about dominating or impressing or having a lot of sweet moves on the battlefield. It's just looking for opportunity and being humble and observant enough to see those opportunities. Now, Obi-Wan's gotcha style of teaching might have helped turn Anakin to the dark side. Right? Like, Anakin isn't like, oh, you got me. Good one, Obi-Wan. He feels humiliated. He's like, I hate you, Obi-Wan. And I think a good teacher would pick up on that and be like, okay, this is not the way to get to Anakin. I'm going to turn him to the dark side if I keep, humiliating him like this. At some points, Anakin reminds me a little bit of Biff from Back to the Future. I mean, Biff's a great character. So, that's not a diss on Hayden Christensen's Anakin. I think, the insecurity that Biff has, which makes him such an interesting and complex character, is evident in Anakin Skywalker as well. But Jedi seem to be horrible teachers. Luke made a lot of similar mistakes with Ben Solo and turned him to the dark side. All right, so this same lesson, and that's why they show it, comes back to haunt Anakin years later as Vader during this episode when he's going after Obi-Wan. Now, he takes that long walk to the hangar. As some of you guys pointed out during the watch-along, Vader loves the catwalk. He loves to walk and have his cape flap in the wind behind him. It's like Vader never parks near the entrance. But anyway, he comes through the doors just as the ship is escaping, the starship, and he grabs it with the Force. That was an incredible moment during watching the show. If you were in the watch along, I was like, wow, I was blown away by that. It was so cool. And it actually is something that Rey does, not as cool, but kind of cool. This was even cooler. But it's similar to what Rey does in Episode 9, where she also stops a starship from taking off. But then Vader grounds it and rips it open. But while he's so focused on, dominating that bigger ship, Obi-Wan slips away in the little ship. He's like, see ya, haha, psych. And that's not Obi-Wan's only trap. Some of you pointed out that why doesn't Vader just grab the other ship, right? But maybe he was just so humiliated and upset. Maybe that's where that, that anxiety, that lack of self-confidence comes in. Vader's triggered, and he loses his concentration for a moment. Maybe he's tired from the Force use that he just did. But Obi-Wan is able to get away. But this isn't Obi-Wan's only trap. He has supposedly delivered Vader on a silver platter for Reva. I can't believe Reva thought she was going to sneak up behind Vader, but she did. But we were right. Many of you guessed this from the first episode, and I agreed with you as the show went on because I felt that Moses Ingram was playing Reva like a good person pretending to be bad. And that's exactly what she is. Although we'll talk about her being corrupted by the dark side in a moment. But anyway, Reva was indeed one of the younglings that we saw in that flashback, and she hid among the dead, and that's how she survived. Anakin did not spare her, although he seems to have known who she was all along. So that's even more cruel. I'd be curious to hear Vader explain as to why he did that instead of, I guess besides just being a sick bastard. But of course, that's what got a content warning for this episode, because it's very similar to the real life tragedy that happened in Uvalde just weeks ago about having to hide among the dead for survival, children having to do that. But it turns out that's how she knows that Vader is Anakin. And also, she's not hunting Obi-Wan. She's hunting Obi-Wan to use him as bait to draw out Vader. Because Vader's been making a lot of visits to the Inquisitors, right? Because of Obi-Wan, and that was Reva's intention all along. But I believe her thirst for vengeance against Anakin has turned her to the dark side herself. So she's partially pretending, but she's partially corrupted. And I think it makes her more like Anakin than she'd care to admit. That she's so twisted, understandably so, by that childhood experience. And I don't know if Disney is the place to do such a dark, sophisticated story. And, I got to tell you, George Lucas, the fact that he dreamed this up, and he too wasn't willing to go all the way. And so, but I don't know, maybe people are captivated by this story. But I think, they're trying to do like DC darkness, but they're not willing to go there, visually or spend enough time in the story to, I think, really get it across. But I think Reva being corrupted and twisted by this, sadness and thirst for vengeance is fascinating. And I think I can see why Lucasfilm feels she's a character that has a future for them. Now, case in point of being turned to the dark side after unsuccessfully taking on Vader, and the Grand Inquisitor is alive, so Rebels continuity is intact. But again, this underscores how there are really no stakes on this show, because we know nobody's going to take down Vader, and when the Grand Inquisitor got stabbed in the stomach, you guys were all like, he can't be dead, he's in Rebels, and sure enough, he's not. So I think that's one of the problems of doing prequels, especially with, the main characters that people know so well. So anyway, she sees Jimmy Smits' discarded communique that was lost when they were all fleeing, and the communique reveals Luke's existence. So will Reva go to Tatooine to take out Luke as a way to hurt Vader, or kidnap him to again try to get bait for Vader? I mean, she can't tell Vader about him because he's not supposed to learn about Luke until the original trilogy. So again, there's only so much that can happen. I don't even know if Vader can show up in episode 6, because it would mean that he would know about Luke, and he's not supposed to. So I think we might have a Vaderless episode 6. I mean, let's see. That seems crazy to me. They have to find a way to work him in. But Obi-Wan, as they're fleeing, senses that something is wrong, that maybe he's now put Luke in danger. So I think, as some of you predicted in the watch-along, maybe the episode 6 big battle will be Obi-Wan versus Reva. And you might recall that in this episode, Obi-Wan and Reva had a conversation about whether or not Obi-Wan was willing to kill. I mean, he kind of killed Anakin, but he didn't make sure it was a done deal. He just walked away and assumed it all went to plan like a Bond villain. But I think that's also partially because Obi-Wan couldn't do the death blow. He was like, I just have to let nature take its course because I can't make it final. So would he be willing to kill Reva? Will Reva be the one who pushes him to kill? I would like to see Reva make it out of this series, because I feel like everybody here deserves a little bit better than what they got on this show, including Reva. But as I said during the watch-along, Jimmy Smits is the real villain of this show. He loses Leia. He makes Obi-Wan go after her instead of using any of the resources he has, the vast resources that he has. And then he gives away Luke's secret, even though he was told to maintain radio silence. And even in reaching out, he didn't have to detail every single thing about their secret plan and tell it and make it so that anyone could find out about it. And also, why wasn't the message set to self-destruct? It's craziness. All right, so as for the lightsaber battles this episode, we got 2 of them, blue versus blue, red versus red. And I wanted lightsaber battles so bad. That's one of the reasons I was looking forward to this show. But so far, I think they're very unsatisfying. I think the sound isn't used quite as well as I would like it to be. I think the feel of the lightsabers is off, as we talked about last week. And I think the fights themselves are too short and lacking some elegance. Anakin did one nice twirl during that flashback that I thought was pretty sweet. I did love it though when Reva cut through the door with the lightsaber. She just cut through that thing like a knife with a hot knife through butter. I loved it. I was glad to see Kumail and Johnny back, although O'Shea Jackson's role is not good. Now he has a very bad role. But Kumail and Johnny, I hope he sticks around. Hey Kumail and Johnny, you got nothing to do. Come to Tatooine and hang out with Ben Kenobi for a few years. That would be great. I would love that if they were to continue the story. And then Leias Sacrifice. To me, it seemed unnecessary. I don't know why that droid didn't just pull her back, and then she could have thrown the grenade after they closed the doors or as they closed the doors. But, it makes up for the horrors of her past. It was kind of trying to do a Rogue One situation, but Rogue One, I think, did a very good job of a realistic suicide mission. But here, the more I think about it while I was writing up my notes for this, I don't think that Tala had to make that sacrifice, but I do think she wanted to make that sacrifice based on the story she tells Obi-Wan just a few moments earlier about some really deep regrets she has in the role that she played unknowingly in hunting people for the Empire. And so she's been trying to make up for it ever since, but I think she's just a very sad, unhappy person who's just so riddled with guilt that she feels that maybe this is the only way that she can make up for what she did, trade a life for a life. That's very moving, and I think it's a different type of sacrifice than was made in Rogue One. And it's an interesting commentary on rebellion and war. And it's also an interesting commentary on, again, how this show is trying to deal with very dark subjects and doesn't have the ability to do it properly because they did in Rogue One, but they don't have the time, and also this is a Disney Plus show, so that it's hard for them to do that. I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. You can't do an all-ages Star Wars show and address these very complex matters. During the watch-along, some of you pointed out they had a ton of stormtroopers there, but they didn't hit anyone but Tala. And then also Lola versus Leia, right? It reminded me of her crawling around the base there, a lot like Leia in The Empire Strikes Back. But also, as many of you pointed out, Leia has never been one who's fixed things during any of the original movies or in the Disney Star Wars movies, the later episodes. She's a leader, both politically and then in the rebellion. So I don't understand where this technical ability has come from. All right, so easy a child, it was all about the space. They just needed someone of that size. So anyway, I think episode 5 is interesting. And it's great to finally see Hayden after he was promised, but it's weaker than the other episode 5s for other Disney Plus shows. And so it's a little bit of a letdown. We'll see. It did trend, and as I talked about in my Ms. Marvel breakdown, I think it's because Disney cheated a little bit by introducing a cool lightsaber animation on likes today for Obi-Wan. If you like anything that says Obi-Wan, the hashtag Obi-Wan, you would get a cool lightsaber effect, and so I think that helped it trend. So very clever, Disney. But we got one more episode to go, and again, I'm not quite sure how Vader's going to show up, if it's going to be all about Luke. But Luke will finally get to see some Luke after spending a lot of time with Leia. What do you think? Share your thoughts down below. Are you a Hayden stan? Share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.